That That is awesome. I'm always missing out on the recording. So I'm just going to reintroduce myself. My name is Yolanda Brinkley. I am the creator of Diversity in Cannes, the independent film movement promoting inclusion at the Cannes Film Festival. And I am here in celebration of Black History Month with Iyabo Boyd, filmmaker, screenwriter, and screenwriter extraordinaire. And welcome to our Cannes conversation.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. So I read your bio and it is awesome. So can you tell us a little more about yourself? Maybe something that wasn't in the bio or something that we missed.
Sure. I think so. I'm also developing a feature film. It's called Kayla and Eddie en Francais. It's written in collaboration with my dad. It's about a recovering addict father who's trying to re-engage with his workaholic daughter while they're in Paris, actually exploring the French African hipster scene. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be a part of Diversity Can, because I have a film that I want to shoot in Paris.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So in your bio and in your yeah, just really in your bio, you mentioned a lot of programs, of global film programs, institutes, fellowships that you've been a part of, right? And I think as a promoter of diversity and inclusion on a global level, um, I think it's important that we as marginalized populations, let's say underrepresented populations, that we get exposure to bigger audiences, right? I think that storytelling is universal. I think that, while some topics are Black topics, are about Black people, I think some stories are universal. They transcend boundaries, they transcend geographic boundaries, racial boundaries, religious boundaries. They're just great stories. With that, I think that, in order to succeed as filmmakers of color, underrepresented filmmakers, our audiences have to be expanded. And I think exposure in these film initiatives is one way to increase the exposure. Another way is international film festivals, global film festivals, because you expand your network and it's a far more far reaching. With that, that's why we are welcoming you here today, because you've been in Sundance, you worked at IFP, you've worked at Chicken and Egg, a lot of organizations, Tribeca Institute, a lot of organizations that have programs that people should tap into. So let's talk about that. How did you become aware of them? What's the application process like? What's, some of your favorite ones? Let us know. Give us the scoop, sis. We're here for the 411.
Okay. So, so just to take it back to what you're saying about audience, of course, these kinds of fellowships are key for that, because they give you a little bit of visibility, to that organization's community. If you can, when they put a press release out, they say, Sundance having this fellowship, these people are on that list. Like, that visibility is great for audience. But I'd say it's actually more beneficial because it's your exposure to the industry. Because the folks who are looking at who's the next whatever, who's coming up, who does Sundance or whoever else believe in, who are they investing time and energy in? So for me, I think filmmakers should think about it more as an opportunity to begin getting tracked in a way, getting on these like tracking lists that producers have, that, DPs are looking for great projects to try to meet somebody, next time. Just even funders, they're looking at these lists and seeing the names and thinking, oh, cool. And festivals are looking at these lists as well and thinking, okay, I want to keep an eye on that film next year, see if it's out, I can play at my festival, that kind of thing. So
let me just clarify. When I say audience, I mean audiences of all kinds, not just the physical audience, somebody to watch your film. That's important too, because it helps shape perception. The more people that see your work helps shape perception. But I'm talking about just everybody in general, expanding your network, get outside of your boundaries, to get your work seen and heard. So to be tracked, to get on the festival circuit, whatever that means. I'm not just speaking of crowds.
Of course. Yes. And it's really amazing places to find mentors, because all of these fellowships come with the folks at the organizations that put them on, who are all incredibly skilled and experienced and are full of wisdom and love for you. They picked you because they believe in your project. So that's like the number one relationship, I think, around that, in terms of what you should be trying to get out of it. And the second relationship are your peers, the other people who are your fellows, because circles rise together. You're going to continue running into each other. You're going to give each other feedback. You're going to hire each other. And you're going to move forward in your careers and continue to do that. And that's going to be beneficial for everyone involved.
I love that. You said circles rise together.
Yeah.
I like that. Somebody else called it cross networking, networking amongst your peers. I've heard Matthew Knowles say it. Yeah, it's good to try to network higher and to advance, but don't ever disregard the possible impact of your peers. So I love that. Fellows rise together. I love that.
Yeah. That's a phrase that we used a lot when I worked at the Tribeca Film Institute and talking to young filmmakers about how to network with each other. It's basically a first, tool for networking.
Yeah. So if I start saying that and don't give you credit, just pull me up on that. Like, ma'am, you got that from me.
It's all good.
So tell me how you came across your first, what was your strategy for application for your first, fellows program, your first application? Like, how did you even know about it? What put that on your radar?
I think the very first one, I believe the first one that I did, at least, I think the first one I did was Sundance. It might have been. And everybody knows Sundance. So that one was easy. But I think that, I had already, just to be fair, I was cheating because I already worked in the industry, I knew who was who. I knew which organizations had the best programs. I had relationships with people who, or I at least knew, I had the email addresses of people who ran that program. So I just had access. But if I had access because I had experience in working on the executive side. But if you just pay attention to, what IFP, they're now called Gotham Media, I think. So Gotham Media, they support filmmakers. They have tons and tons of lists of fellowships and opportunities. Same with the IDA on the documentary side. IDA has a great list. POV on the doc side has a great list. NoFilmSchool.com always has great lists every quarter for grants and fellowships. So you just do a bunch of Googling, you'll always find something. I think Reddit, there's a lot of communities on Reddit now that are exchanging this kind of information. So that's how you can find them. And in terms of approaching it, it's hard to describe. I was definitely scared, it's you're trying to do something that is a dream of yours, but there's so many elements, there's steps towards that, right? You have to understand a lot about grant writing, which is a very different skill from making a film, because you're not only just making the film, you're not writing about the film you are, but you're also writing about yourself. And you're trying to connect the dots between the film and yourself. Because they want to support a film that's good, of course, but a fellowship, the key word is the fellow. They want to invest in you. And so in that written language, that grant writing language about yourself, you have to also underline why you're amazing investment. It doesn't have to feel gross in a weird way, oh, why am I so special? It's just what are you up to? What do you care about? And where do you see yourself? And how can they be a part of that journey? And it's just telling that narrative of kind of where you are in your experience, in your creative evolution, in your professional evolution, and connecting the dots to this is a great partnership because, get on board because. Without, of course, being, big-headed and things like that. It should be very genuine because they want to invest in people that are going to make this a better industry and a better world. So always be a good person in your written text as well.
Okay, good. So you were about to outline the steps. So I think that's a good way. Let's outline the steps to the process. So you figured out where, which programs you want to apply to just based on Google, right? Looking at No Film School's quarterly list. right? Now you've found some programs that you want to apply to. Let's talk about the steps, because what I'm interested in is actually having someone walk away from this conversation, understanding what they need to do to apply to a program, whether they make it in or not. We want to know what we have to do.
Yeah. Okay, so you identify what options there are. Then you have to cull that list down to which programs are the right ones for you. It's not worth the time and energy applying for things that aren't the right fit. So look for things that are right for you. And then look at the deadline, of course, make sure that it's, coming up at a certain distance from the present that is doable. If the thing is due tomorrow, don't stress it, because you're not going to be ready unless you have, materials that you've already written for a different piece, different fellowship, a different grant. You can maybe, scoot something in quickly. But if you haven't written a word, just wait. Just wait till next year. It's fine. I would give yourself, if you're writing from scratch, I would give yourself a month, 2 months, before something is due to start writing that material, especially if it's your first time, because you want to give yourself time to do a draft, to revise that draft, to share it with a few people, get them feedback. Look for somebody in your community that you see as a mentor who has experience reading these kinds of materials, someone who maybe used to work at a festival or used to work for a fund, or someone who just is really good with vetting people, who's been involved with contests, like anything that, even if it's like someone who college apps, things like that. There's a certain kind of quality of language that they're looking for. So find somebody like that in your community, ask them to read it, give you feedback. So once you've got it all together, and that's right, the writing of it is its own thing. We could talk about that. But once you've got it all together, you submit, if there is a fee for it, you can, especially if you're a person of color, you can email them a few weeks in advance. I wouldn't do it the day before. A few weeks in advance and say, hey, I'm planning on applying to this. Here's why I think I'm a great fit. Very briefly, I would love to request a fee waiver. If you have that, I would love to request a fee waiver, period. Thank you for your consideration.
Let me jump in here about these fee waivers. Listen, look on there, not like I'm from the school of nothing beats a failure but a try, but absolutely look on their material and see if they offer them. If they say they don't offer them, don't email them asking them for a fee waiver, right? Because that burns me up. That's the first thing I have on my page. So I just want to say, read the description, the guidelines, the instructions, the rules, just to make sure, because that puts a sour taste in my mouth, and it may be because I'm a growing movement, but yes, just check.
Yeah,
and again, I'm definitely from the school of nothing beats a failure but a try, but check it out. Do your research in advance. But
for sure. But I just will say that, like, as for people who are women or folks of color, there's just so many opportunities to make the costs of things lower than they can be. So just definitely read the rules, but don't sleep on sending a nice email, because
okay, all right. Well, you're the expert. I'm gonna fall back. I'll defer. So email them, ask for the discount or the complimentary submission.
Check your rules first and then ask for a discount. If they don't give it to you, then apply.
Right.
And of course, so if you're applying for a fellowship, it's usually just a written application. Maybe they will ask for links to your previous work. Maybe they ask for a sample for something that you're working on now. So you have to assemble that kind of, edit something together for that. Make sure it's, clean and tight and, fits the rules. Again, make sure it's the right time, the right length. And then if you have a box, like, just a quick tip, if they have a box in the application that says, please describe your work sample, don't sleep on that box. That's a really good opportunity for you to position yourself. So if if you have a sample and it's a little bit old, or it's not exactly what you hoped it, you wish it would be, you can say in that section, the sample is that, yada, yada, yada. It is not representative of blank. because it's early or whatever, but it is representative of the things that are important to me, et cetera, et cetera. So you can kind of really let the viewer or the reader understand what kind of mindset you want them to be in.
Okay.
In that section. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's also, if you see me looking down, I'm just looking to see if we have questions in the chat.
Sure. Yeah.
That's like that. So just, just FYI.
Yeah, no problem. So that's that. Some places ask for a lookbook. It depends on what kind of thing you're applying for. I think that with lookbooks, there's kind of a weird, we're in like a lookbook golden age or something right now. There's a lot of attention about lookbooks, And I think that it's great if you are a secret graphic designer, if you have friends that can hook you up, and make something look really pretty, or if you have time to devote to a gorgeous lookbook, absolutely. If you don't have those skills or resources, you make something simple, just make sure the content is what's there. The text that you put there, the pictures, the images that represent your work, your director's statement, your artistic statement, and your storytelling. That's the number one important thing. So don't be intimidated by everybody who has these like fancy lookbooks. And so one other little, this is something I would do when I was earlier in my career that I think could help sometimes. You have to use it wisely, is to think about if you have a connection to whatever thing that you're applying to. So if if you have a friend who works at the front desk, at that place, or you have a friend that was in the fellowship last year, or any kind of, friend of a friend vibe. I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's any shame in saying, hey, Yolanda, I applied to blank, 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 and I know that you had a project there, blah, blah, blah. I attached the thing that I'm doing. I'm wondering if you would feel comfortable just raising a flag over there, on my behalf. I'd really appreciate it. And they can, of course, say yes or no, but that person, if they say yes, they might email whoever they know there and say, hey, heads up, a friend of mine who's really talented is applying, and you should just, I hope that you'll keep an eye out for them. And they'll say, yay or nay. Again, this is a controversial thing because, folks on the inside might be thinking, oh my God, stop name dropping, or, we don't like to have like a privileged who's who list or whatever. But those things do matter, in the world of who we know, and even in the world of this pandemic where networking is much harder than it used to be. I think that's a tool in the toolbox that folks should take more advantage of in our current time.
Okay, I want to just jump in right there and say, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I think our counterparts use it all the time. I just think that it's a tool that often goes overlooked in the underrepresented population because perhaps we don't have the network that's there, right? I definitely don't frown upon that. That's just a form of, it's a loose form of nepotism. And Hollywood is built on that. So I absolutely do not have a problem with that. And I recommend it and I suggest it. So
well, great.
That's my 2 cents.
We're on the same page. Fantastic.
Yes, ma'am. And like I said, I love just as a festival organizer, the fee waiver thing is a little bone of contention for me. But as someone who's applied to things, I absolutely feel you. So we're not far apart in that either.
Yes. Okay, good.
Yeah. So what's next?
I think what's next is just making sure your profile publicly is good to go, that you have social media, that you have a website if you can, and that it has your contact information on it, the links work, et cetera, so that when they're in deliberations or when they're discussing the project, somebody might Google you and, you want them to find what you want them to find, so just make sure that you're putting your best foot forward in terms of like public visibility. So that's kind of I think that's the A to B on that part. I can jump forward if you'd like, or we can go to questions, or let me
Yeah,
know.
no. Like I'm really just like, I want to know about your experiences and, maybe pick a program, right,
Yeah,
that you went through and what was some of the benefits. I just really want to hear your story. And I'm hoping that when this plays back, that somebody can take something away and say, yes, I am going to do this. This is what I'm going to do. So this is really about you. It's not about, I'm just adding my 2 cents because I'm chatty.
sure. um, well, one thing I wanted to share, a couple things I want to share is that rejection is a huge part of this whole thing, and it's natural. It's going to happen. So don't let a rejection ruin your life, or make you feel bad about applying to something again, because oftentimes they might have, you don't know, oftentimes, like, what they think about your project. You have no idea whether you got it or not. So they might think, wow, this is kind of interesting, but I don't know if they're ready yet. Let's say no this time. But you don't know that. So in your mind, you might be like, man, screw them. Like, I'm not going to do this. Blah, blah, blah. But you don't even know, if you apply again the next year, they might be like, oh, wow. Like, so when I worked at Chicken and Egg, I reviewed these kind of applications all the time. And so when a repeat applicant came through, we, of course, we knew that they applied before, and we're like, oh, great, this is interesting. How far have they come? But what it is really is that familiarity, because they recognize your name or recognize your project's name from the year before. And again, it's kind of in the vein of the who you know. It's like familiarity breeds comfort. Just because, oh, I've heard them before, I've seen that before, I feel more comfortable accepting that idea. I would be careful, applying for something too early if you're really not ready, if the text is not there, if the footage is not there, whatever. But, especially women and people of color can be a little bit more hard on ourselves on those kinds of things than some other folks. So question yourself, maybe you are ready. Like, don't assume that you're not. But even if you're like, almost there, I would apply, because they might see some potential in you. They might recommend you to something else. Some other organization might say, hey, we're looking for filmmakers for this program. We want to make sure we're catching the best of the best. Are there any people who, didn't get into yours that you think that we should look at? So just apply, and that opportunity might come to you in the next time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about, one of your programs. Maybe the one where you feel you have the best results that benefited you the most. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that application process, and then the actual fellows process and what you gained from it.
Well, I mean, I definitely, Sundance programs in general are, I think, the best of the best. They are just so good at their jobs. They understand what they're doing. They didn't fall into this. They are very specific about what they're trying to do, which is cultivate young artists, and with that cultivation is a level of a holistic understanding that comes along with the artistic approach, the business approach, etc. There's an emotional component that you wouldn't think would be there, because it's so intimidating that you would just assume that it's going to be like, a really intense, scary, high level, intimidating program. And it definitely is that, but they actually kind of attack you on an emotional level first, attack you in a good way. They're like, let's dive in, we're going to get to know each other real fast. And that kind of vulnerability that program creates allows you to open up. And for this, for your process as a fellow to be about your development as a person, in addition to your development as a professional. So Sundance for me takes the cake because of that element. But I'm a softie Cancer, so I really value those things. I think it depends on what your values are. But I did the Sundance Screenwriting Intensive. I did the Sundance Creative Producers Fellowship on the documentary side, and I did the Sundance, the Film Festival's Talent Forum. And I think there's by the time that you get in the door, they are reflecting back to you how much they believe in you, and they're trying to make sure that you understand that. And so once you get past this feeling of, do I belong here? I'm scared. It's really it's such an open book, and the contexts are so deep, but it's really kind of like a consultant space. Like they feel like your advisors, your producers, people who are going to read your work or watch your work and give amazing feedback, and are speaking to you from the context of people who are working with the best filmmakers in the world, you know, and are comparing your projects to that.
Okay.
So that's my favorite. No shade to all the others, because I love you all.
No, absolutely no shade. And we didn't mention them maybe in the very beginning. So it's definitely no shade. And so did you get in the first time you applied?
I think so. So I was gonna say with this other grant, actually called, it's the SF Film Rain Grant. I was rejected the first time I applied, and I got it the second time. And I think the difference between the two are that I had done a lot of work on my own. You know, I had completely rewritten and revamped my thinking about the director's statement and like why I was making this film, and updated that language. The film itself had evolved. You know, all the creative work had continued during that year. And so I just knew my story better, and I knew how to articulate it better. You know, so the synopsis from the first grant to the second grant was just much clearer, you know, more specific to what I wanted the movie to be. And I also knew more about my audience. I knew more about what I wanted the film to look like visually. I could speak to that more clearly, you know. It was, you know, probably just a little bullshitty, if I can say the B word, you know. It's like when you're trying something, you're faking it till you make it on a certain level, right?
Yeah.
And then as you continue working, you just get to know it better and better, and you can fake it less, so that they can really feel that authenticity. Yeah.
That's big. So that was your first one. You applied previously and you were rejected.
Mm-hmm.
Had you applied to, so you've been into, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 Sundance programs. Had you applied to the other programs as well, or did you get your one and then start applying to the others? How did that work?
Yeah, so I was working in documentary heavily at the time a few years ago, and so I applied for the creative producing fellowship, and I was also producing. And so I did that fellowship first, and that was really intense. It was a year-long fellowship, I believe, or 9 months. And then, you know, maybe 2 years later, I had pivoted and was directing and writing. And so I applied for these, you know, the screenwriting intensive. Actually, you know what? I applied for the Sundance screenwriting lab. That is the big lab, like the real one that happens in the summertime, the one that's really exciting and like makes your career blow up like crazy. That's when I applied to, and I got rejected. Okay. So there's 2 good rejection stories. I got rejected, and then instead, the team reached out to me and said, hey, we're doing this smaller program that's called the Screenwriting Intensive. That's just a day and a half or 2 days in LA. It's not on the resort, you know, it's not with Bob, the whole thing. It's just 2 days in our office in LA. And I'm like, of course, you know, oh, I lost my LA, I'll have to fix that. So I'm like, oh, there we go. And I'm like, of course, you know, but it was not what I was expecting to do, but it ended up being amazing in its own right. We had an incredible instructor, and my fellows were top notch. So sometimes you have to also like not get caught up on thinking something is going to be your ticket or one thing is going to be the thing that changed your life. You never know what other kinds of doors are out there.
Yeah.
So yeah. Let me see if I can fix this real quick.
It's funny that you say that, because with diversity in Cannes,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, we're a small emerging movement, and I call us a movement, but oftentimes we're selective because we only normally accept 16 to 20 films, right? So it just makes us automatically selective just because we don't have the capacity.
Yeah.
But sometimes, you know, I have other opportunities, other screening opportunities. Like last year, we went to the BBC to screen during their Black History Month. Not last year, now in 2019, we went to the BBC to screen a program during their Black History Month celebration. Some of the films that didn't make it into the showcase, you know, I reached out to the filmmaker and said, hey, I'm doing this screening at the BBC for their Black History Month program. Are you interested in participating? Hey, I'm programming the shorts for TD Jakes MegaFest for their first International Faith and Family Film Festival. Are you interested? Right? So it's not any money or any value, it's just more exposure to, from our perspective. But just because a rejection doesn't mean that we don't like your project. Rejection just means it may not fit with what we're doing. Like, because of diversity in Cannes is so niche and we're on a global scale, I try to make it all inclusive diversity. So if I get 500 Black films, I can't accept all 500. If I get 500 stories about LGBT stories, I can't accept all 500, right? So just because you're not accepted doesn't mean that we don't like you or we don't like your work. So I try to stress to the filmmakers that just in my communication, in my correspondence, and yeah, I think that's just important to know. Like you said, you didn't get into the big one, but you got into the smaller one and it was beneficial. So just don't block your blessings,
Yeah.
thinking that there's only one way in to something.
And no, at the end of the day, it's what you make out of it. You know,
Yeah.
both in terms of the participation, of course, you know, we can talk about that, you know, how to get the best out of that. But it's also about the publicity. Like if you were hoping to get in that big press release and you were like, oh, I'm missing out, blah, blah, you can make your own. I mean, as I hope folks know this, you know, in the world of social media, you can make your own buzz.
Yeah.
So just use whatever you have, even if it's, you know, a photo of you in the Sundance office, you know, a selfie, and just being like, I'm here for this thing. You know, people are like, that's awesome. Like they don't care that it's a press release. You know? So you just have to be, you know, look for the bright side and make your own luck on that.
Yeah, I'm laughing because Diversity in Cannes started in 2010 in a small room in the Majestic Hotel. It had maybe about 7 to 15 people attending, right? And I said, I could be doing something in the bathroom at the Majestic Hotel in Cannes, because I'm saying I'm at the Cannes Film Festival and I'm doing this thing, right? Nobody would really know what I'm doing. Like we could be meeting in the bathroom, talk for 5 minutes, talking about something, and I have diversity in Cannes. So you absolutely can create your own buzz, and that's what you need to do until your work stands on its own, your name is recognized on its own, right? It's nothing wrong. It's nothing wrong with that. So I love that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like the branding space, I don't know if it's the rule, is like it takes humans, an audience, like 9 times before they really engage in something. So
yeah,
there's no shame at all in self-promotion. Like that's the name of the game right now. Like especially in this pandemic, you know, distribution is limited. Distribution is audience building is the new distribution, I think. You know, look at
absolutely.
Followers on social media, on TikTok, etc. Walking into any conversation with a distributor saying I have this many followers, that's going to be a huge component of, you know, how you're considered these days, you know. So self-promotion is definitely important. I need to work on it. So we all need to work on it.
Absolutely. So listen, you mentioned that you worked when you were working at Chicken and Egg, I believe that you were responsible for reviewing the applications and the grant applications. And so I know you said, you know, what worked for you, redefining your director statement and everything. Is there something additional you can add to what they're looking for to
Yeah,
help someone who's watching, since you were on that side of the business?
yeah. I think the biggest connection opportunity in a grant application for me as a reader is between what I'm watching and what I'm reading. And, it's like I said, writing a grant is not the same thing as making a film. It is its own special skill, and you have to kind of learn it in itself, in a way that is bringing a reader along on a narrative of what you're making and who you are. And also, giving them opportunity to learn to trust you, to gain trust in you, to build confidence in you. Because, like you said, there's not a lot of spots at these places. And if they only have 10 spots and there's 500 people applying, they're looking for an opportunity to say no because they can only say yes 10 times. And so
Right.
your job is to make it impossible for them to say no, to speak to every hesitation they might have. But my point is that connecting the dots between what you wrote and what your footage is the biggest, most important thing to me. Because if you say, I want to make a verite film in the style of, Wes Anderson, but a documentary or something, and then what I see is a talking heads, whatever, Nat Geo kind of style movie, those are different things. And so I just, as a reader, I'm going, huh? I'm not understanding the connection. So your job is either to get those two things so that they match, or to use your text, use your writing to help the reader understand what your goals are, help them understand connecting the dots. That's the number one thing, because if you're reading and you don't understand what they're doing and how the text and the video connect, it's just a huge red flag. So that's my number one tip, I'd say.
Okay. So listen, we jumped into the conversation and you said some things. You were like, oh, that was earlier in my career.
Mhm.
From Tish, where did you go? Like, bring me up to speed on that. Just as a refresher, like, just let us know,
Yeah.
you know, from Tish, what happened?
So I had gone to an arts high school. I studied film at arts high school. So by the time I finished film school in college, I'd already been making films hardcore for like 6 years.
Oh,
And
wow.
frankly, I was burned out. I was 21, 22, and I was just, hustling in New York, and I was exhausted. So I went home. I applied to be fair, I applied for a couple of internships before I left New York. I didn't get any of them. I tried to name drop someone and completely screwed it up. Didn't get it. And I was like, oh crap. So I went home to Colorado, got a job at a store, whatever. And then I fell into grant writing, actually, very early. There is a grant writing program. There's some kind of program that you could get paid to learn how to write grants for nonprofits. And I was like, I can get paid to learn to do anything, sure. So I did. I started working in, and I also, when I left NYU, like the options felt like you either go intern at Focus Features, you move to LA, or go be a PA. And I just, whatever reason, my ego, whatever, maybe just my skill set, I don't know. I didn't want to be a PA. I'd been basically being a PA for 6 years already.
Right.
So I just don't want to do that, And so I kind of checked out of film for a couple of years, worked in nonprofits, wrote grants and supported different social social causes. Moved back to New York, had like moved back to New York, got a job in nonprofit in Harlem, was really unhappy, self-sabotage, got fired, went back to the place that I tried to get an internship with before. I think it was 2 years later. I went back, applied for an internship again. They took me that time. So again, rejection. They took me the second time. That was IFP. So I worked at IFP for a seasonal thing, fell in love with the people who worked there, gained like a lot of mentors there who believed in me.
Mm-hmm.
They got me my next like 5 jobs. So
okay.
through people believing me, through making phone calls on my behalf, I got the next 2 or 3 jobs from a mentor at IFP.
Mm.
And then I was working at Tribeca supporting young filmmakers. And like at the time, my goal was to be Michelle Satter, you know, who's the head of the film department at Sundance. I wanted to support other filmmakers. That was my goal. So I was doing that work at Tribeca, working with teenagers. We had a guest speaker who worked at Chicken and Egg.
Uh-huh.
We became acquainted. She was leaving Chicken and Egg shortly after we met and said, "Hey, are you looking for like a real job?" And I was like, "Yeah." So she got me an interview, got the job, worked there for four years. I started Brown Girl Stock Mafia in my last year at Chicken and Egg, and I made some films. So when I came back to New York, I made a couple like had a lot of friends who were musicians, hung out at a lot of shows, made a few music videos just on my own, just really low, low quality music videos. And I think when I was at Chicken and Egg, but right before I started that job, I had met a filmmaker named Evan Bucksbaum, and he asked me to produce his feature. I don't know why he asked me this, but
Because you're the bomb.com.
I had no skills at the time. I had no skills. He asked me to produce his feature.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, I went to the desert. We shot in New Mexico for 3 or 4 months. We like lost all of our we had all the money to shoot, lost all the money to shoot 2 weeks before, had to scramble, so just like a lot of really on the job, scary, movie training, young kids in the desert figuring it out. And we made this feature, and I was doing that on a full-time job. I asked them, since I had the plan before I got the job, I said, heads up, at some point I'm gonna have to go make this movie, and I'm gonna need like 3 months off to do it. And because I already had it in the books, they said, okay. So that was like amazing, I had a full-time job waiting for me when I got back. So went back to work, ended up making a short film for myself called Forever Alley. On the weekends, did a Kickstarter, for that, and shot that film. It played a bunch of festivals. And then before I left Chicken and Egg, I also met these other filmmakers, Jeremy Levine and Landon Van Soest, and fell in love with a sample that I saw of their film. I saw it actually at IFP. They're at IFP, and I just saw a sample. As an executive, I saw their sample. It's about a Black girl coming of age in St. Louis. And I was like, you 2 white guys need a Black woman to help you make this movie, you should hire me. And they're like, ha, ha, ha. I'm like, no, seriously, you should hire me. And they're like, oh, you're absolutely right. We should hire you. And they did. And so I quit Chicken and Egg for other reasons, was doing Brown Girls, was producing this feature documentary, and the cool thing about that doc is that the big story is that we had gotten into Tribeca. By the time I got on the film, they'd already gotten into Tribeca, but I didn't think the film was done. I didn't think it was ready. And so I coaxed them into bowing out of Tribeca. We spent another year editing, and then applied for festivals again, and this time got into Berlin as our global premiere, and then got into Tribeca again. So that was a huge, also a couple of kids in the edit suite, trying to figure it out. And
what's the name of that project?
It's called For Akeem. It's a doc for Akeem.
For Akeem. Oh yes. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Everyone should watch that. It's available everywhere. And yeah, so after I did that, I did the Sundance Producing Lab for that project, and this Impact Partners Lab for that. And honestly, after producing 2 features, I just kind of said to myself, I want to make my own films. I want to be the writer director. I've been making films since I was 15. It's like, I want to get back to that. I want to focus on my own growth. And so even though, I turned down a lot of producing jobs and just focused on developing a feature. So as a part of Sunbelt, the first film, Sunbelt Express, the one in the desert, we got into this festival in Paris, actually, the Champs-Élysées. It's like American Showcase or something like that. We got into that, and my dad forced his way onto my trip. He came, you know, and we ended up having this incredible adventure. My dad and I, and he's a long-term recovering addict. He's been clean for 30 years, and we just weren't always very close. And then we became closer in my 20s and my early 30s. And he came on this trip, and we had an incredible adventure. And the whole trip, I was like, "This is a movie. This is a movie. This is a movie." You know. And so I came home, just like didn't, you know, just had it in the back of my mind for probably 6 months or something. And finally and I was working at Chicken and Egg, and I was like, I don't have time to write a movie, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And I finally was like, I have to write this right now. I just have to do it. So I actually wrote my first feature while commuting. So commuting from my house to my work every day, which is only like half an hour, I would just write on my phone. I would just write Google Docs on my phone. I wrote the entire first draft on my phone, you know?
Wow.
And it was like 70 pages, and, you know, mostly just my memories of conversations and like a little bit of structure, and wasn't, you know, it was raw and, you know, interesting, but it wasn't like professional, you know? And I applied to the Film Independent Screenwriting Lab with that, did not get in. And I was like, okay, I tried, I'm good, you know, and like put it on the shelf for a couple of years. And then a friend of mine, you know, I was complaining to her about how I really wanted to make a film, blah, blah. And she's like, what do you have? I have like, I wrote the script. And she's like, why don't you do that? You know, focus on that. So I spent 5 years writing that script, you know, that's when I got rejected from Sundance for the big lab, the big screenwriters lab, did the small lab, and things kind of just kept rolling from there. And now the film is still, you know, I was hoping to make it last year, but then the pandemic happened.
Yes.
So pandemic pending, hopefully we can make it happen this year. But it is set in Paris, so we have a global, you know, challenge of just getting Americans in Paris right now is complicated.
Okay. Well, there are Parisians in Paris.
Yes.
And there are Francophones in Paris. We have a little network of filmmakers over there. So just let us know if there's anything, you know, any way that we can help.
Absolutely. That'd be amazing. We shot a teaser in November, right before the pandemic, with an incredible local crew. And you know, I would be so thrilled to be able to get back out there and work with them.
Well, that's awesome. That is absolutely awesome. So listen, I see that Lisa Cortez is an executive producer on Me Time, which is, again, the 2020 official selection for the Diversity in Cannes Short Film Showcase, going live this weekend on Eventive. So diversityincanned.eventive.org. It's actually free of charge. We're just requesting donations, and most of the films are family friendly. Me Time, not so much, but we love it. We love it, love it, love it.
It's a grown family, you know. You can watch it with your mom. If you were right. You watch it with your mom.
Absolutely. So how did Lisa Cortez get involved in Me Time? And Lisa Cortez is one of the executive producers of the film Precious. She directed the Apollo, produced the Apollo documentary. She worked with Stacey Abrams, past gubernatorial candidate for Georgia, who effectively changed Georgia blue. She worked with her on that documentary. How did you get Lisa? And she's a friend to the movement. She's been on our Cannes conversations. She's been in Cannes as a guest speaker. Yeah, so how did Lisa get involved?
I'm trying to rack my brain and remember how I met Lisa.
Okay.
It probably was in relationship to when I was working at IFP. So one benefit of working for other organizations that support filmmakers, I mean, there's lots of benefits, but one of them is that you have access to a Rolodex that the organization has access to. And if it's an organization that does events and they invite, you know, speakers, then, and you're involved in that invitation, in that producing of that event, then you begin a relationship with that person. And I believe I met Lisa probably at IFP, like probably 15 or more years ago.
Oh, wow.
When I was a baby filmmaker. And
Mhm.
it's probably because we were doing something with Precious, I'm guessing that that's the connection.
Okay.
But I just asked her, I just know her. I know, you know who she is. She's amazing. She's very sweet and
Yeah.
generous and has great taste and is great at strategy. And I just wanted to have someone who had those kinds of connections and could believe in this project and could give me advice. And I just asked if she wanted to be involved. And this was, she said, yeah, which is great. I
Okay.
mean, she's much busier now. I mean, she was probably busy
Yes.
at the time, but even busier now.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so that's probably how. Yeah, she's
Okay.
great.
Okay. Well, that's awesome. I was just curious. So, in closing, as we wrap it up, where can folks find you? Um, and any last parting advice, words to share to emerging filmmakers looking to get into fellows programs?
Yeah, thank you so much again for having me. It's been a pleasure. You can follow me on Instagram. It's at Iyabo_Boyd. On Twitter at Iyabo_Iyabo. On Facebook, and also on Brown Girl Stock Mafia. It's a collective that I run. And in terms of last takeaways for fellowships and grants, I would just be really mindful of looking for mentors. There's a lot of folks who are involved in these processes who are looking for someone to discover and to, bring to the masses and to like cultivate. So just position yourself as someone who's worthy of that kind of attention. And when you get it, try to lean into it, let someone adopt you if they want to adopt you, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and then once you get to a point where, you've soaked up all their advice and it's time for you to get kicked out of the nest and fly, go do that. Go implement all the education that they've given you and bring it back and say, hey, look what I did, and continue to communicate and cultivate those relationships. I think that's really important.
That's great. That's sound advice. And as I was sitting here thinking, I'm sure since you were in Berlinale and you traveled to Paris and stuff, I'm sure you know about the Cannes Film Festival programs,
Hmm.
the Atelier and the Residence programs.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. So that's good. It seems like that's something that you could qualify for, especially for your feature. And then if you're writing, the Residence is a writing program. The Atelier program is more of a, producing, directing program.
Yeah.
So I would look into those if you haven't already.
Thank you. I'll check it out. And I would love to continue our relationship and the Diversity at Cannes relationship and continue sharing my work with you all and seeing what opportunities there might be.
We're always open to it. Welcome to the Diversity in Can family.
Thank
Once you
you.
are accepted, it's like a lifelong thing. We love our filmmakers, and we definitely see you. We have our eye on you, and we wish you nothing but the best.
That's so sweet and wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a good one.
You too. Good night. Happy
Good
Friday.
night.